Oh, okay, and that would be a knife. That's a big one. Are we entering some sacrificial realm here?
Why don't you play the next cut on that CD as I summon the spirits?
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Yeah, thanks for having us. My name is Abbey Davis, and I'm the drummer with Oryx.
Hey, I'm Tommy Davis, guitarist, vocalist for Oryx.
And how would you describe the music of Oryx?
Well, we are a mix of things, but we have, just atmospheric sludge metal with some dissonance in there, but also just some doom thrown into. I think we're a mix of genres.
A mix of mostly very slow, very heavy genres, right?
Yeah. Yes, slow and slow. Yeah.
So I spoke to a guy who wrote a book about doom, sludge, and other kinds of slow, heavy music. Do you have any feelings on the difference between doom metal and sludge metal?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, I think when I used to think of doom, I mean, many years ago, I was thinking corrupted and, you know, much more, I guess, darker music. I think doom today is has a lot more similarity with like stoner rock. But then I think sludge kind of takes to a darker realm and kind of like entertains the gritty, more, I guess, nuanced, like darker approach.
I mean, my feeling is that a lot of sludge is, or at least the background of the performers, you know, much like Black Flag, they came more from a hardcore background, and sludge was kind of this, you know, almost an act of defiance against, you know, what was prevalent in hardcore at the time, and this kind of antagonistic way of punishing the audiences by playing slower and slower and slower, but also including lots of feedback and dissonance and, you know, some of the stuff that you mentioned. Whereas doom metal kind of always, you know, it kept the bluesy, you know, Black Sabbath roots of metal, right. And, you know, essentially it's like a genre that never changed, you know, from, you know, 1970 to 1980 to 1990, like these bands more or less always sounded the same, but you kind of see it like infiltrating other scenes, like, you know, death doom bands like Winter, or like these gothic metal bands like Paradise Lost or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I've personally been on kind of a quest to better define both genres. I think they're both so like there's so much crossover, and they're both so sort of like can be a bit ambiguous in their own ways, where there's so much crossover with like stoner rock and then with sludge metal there's a lot of, I guess, subcategories there that kind of cross over. But yeah, I don't know, I definitely think doom has been, like, you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's a Sabbath worship all day for sure.
Now, would you say there's aspects of that Sabbath worship to your sound, or at least on your earliest recordings?
I mean, I think in our roots, yeah, like it's one of those things that's like hard to, not that we want to shake it, but it's kind of like hard to shake, you know, your like foundation, you know, we both grew up on Black Sabbath and a lot of stuff like that from the, you know, 70s type stuff. And I mean, I think it's like no matter what we write, it's going to come through in some way, but ultimately, like the quest with Oryx is, I mean, it's not necessarily to punish, you know, our goal is not to punish the listener. Like, our goal is to take the listener on a journey, but there is punishment within that journey for sure.
So tell me what led to the two of you forming Oryx.
So we started playing in 2012, a little bit before that, and Tommy was looking for a drummer for his earth/corrupted style of music. And at the time, we were both living in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is a tiny little town that definitely has a scene, or had a scene at the time, but was really kind of focused on punk style. And there was few and, you know, in between with like doomier, heavier style musicians, I think. So Tommy had a challenging time finding the right fit for what he was looking for as far as a drummer. I had started playing drums in high school, which was a disaster, I guess. It wasn't anything. It was more punk. Yeah, I was figuring out what I was doing. It was a learning experience. It just was something I was figuring out. So even when I met Tommy and we started playing together, it was kind of learning as I went at that time too. And we started jamming together. It worked, and we were kind of just figuring out what our sound was going to be and what we wanted it to sound like and what kind of our first recording would be. And we did start with a bassist initially, our buddy James Yoakum, but you know, that was short-lived. We figured we wanted to move forward as a two-piece, and it worked for many years after that to be just a two-piece.
So originally formed in New Mexico, you guys ended up moving to Colorado. Why Colorado?
Yeah, we moved to Colorado initially. There was a couple of reasons. A big reason was because I was going to graduate school here, and it was the next step for us from Las Cruces. And then another reason is we've really had connected to the scene in Colorado Springs, the DIY scene there, and played shows there and in Denver as well. So we had started to build friendships with people that were in both scenes and booking shows, and started to come up to play shows from New Mexico in Colorado pretty often. We'd always make sure to come through here on tours. And it just did seem like the next right step for us because of the connections we'd built here. And we really connected to the scene, I think, in both Denver and Colorado Springs, because there is a huge DIY roots formed within both scenes, and it really felt natural. It felt like a natural move for us. It felt like the right move for us. And we weren't really sure what we were going to do after I finished school, but after even being here for even less than a year, it, really felt like the right home for us. And especially for Oryx, even just starting out here, it didn't feel like we had to completely start over. We had met people, we had met bands here. We were able to start playing shows right away, and actually gave us more opportunities to play bigger shows and also to record in bigger recording studios than we had ever had the opportunity to back in New Mexico. So it right away, there's a lot of benefits to moving here, and then we just felt like we fit in right away.
So a DIY scene, but also specifically a lot of doom metal and sludge metal bands, right? Like Primitive Man are from that area, and the Company of Serpents are from that area. Was that part of the appeal?
Yeah, I mean, we connected with bands that were from here. Even when we were living in Las Cruces, we were booking a lot of DIY shows, helping run a DIY venue down there. And there was definitely like a very strong connection with Denver bands and Colorado Springs bands that, another band I would mention is Catheter. They would come down to that area all the time and play shows with Phobia. And there were some like legendary shows at that point, and we really just gravitated towards the scene here in Denver and felt like it was beginning to be our second home and stuff. So like Permanent Man and Serpents. I mean, we definitely, Blighter, Rogog, a lot of the bands from the Springs. It was just this massive community that we felt like we had to be a part of.
So tell me how you guys write songs. What's the process for you guys?
Our process is very collaborative. I mean, we tend to begin constructing with riffs, which, as you mentioned before, is a very doom oriented way of writing, I think. And then, beyond that, we really work on layering, but it's definitely a collaborative experience. We try and really communicate what the feel of the song should be and what we're trying to express.
Yeah, we'll get together, and Tommy is main songwriter, obviously, with writing the guitar parts and the lyrics. And then he'll come up with some riffs. Tommy and I will jam together more often just because our bassist does live in Colorado Springs, which is about an hour away from here for those who aren't familiar with the area. So he'll come up and practice with us. But as far as the writing process too, a lot of it comes from just ideas that are born in the practice space. And I don't play guitar, but I'll have a collaborative, discussion with Tommy about where, I think things should go. And we usually, we can discuss what our ideas are together. And that's been the way since we started playing. We figured out how to communicate with each other. He would give me some ideas of what he was thinking with drums, and I'm giving his, some ideas with what I'm thinking with where vocals are and things like that. So like Tommy's saying, we have always been a really we've had a collaborative songwriting process together. And I think that has helped us grow together with our voice as a band.
Does the riff come first?
Yeah, always.
Yep.
Yeah, that's been a very consistent aspect of our songwriting. I think the finding a riff that really articulates a feeling is can be a very complex journey. And, I also feel like these songs tend to be, I don't know, like they almost seem to feel like they're almost written in our heads, and we're just trying to like articulate what it is that is supposed to be. And some of these puzzle pieces fit together perfectly and others feel like they clash. And so we work with like creating through, I think, what is usually like a cognitive dissonance, and trying to articulate like what angst and all kinds of just, I don't know, viewpoints on our society and things like that. I mean, we just sort of like try and funnel that into like the articulation of the riff and how to layer that and create an expressive journey there.
I just wanted to add, having Eric join as our bassist, he really did help evolve, I think, our songwriting process as far as having a third person in and be a voice as to what sounds good and what doesn't. And just having someone, be a part of that. It's, for so long, it was just Tommy and I. So I think you really hear that on our newest record, where Tommy's collaborating with a person who, like our bassist, Eric, plays guitar as well. Like that's his first choice with playing. So he's able to work with Tommy in that way where they can riff together, and then that builds, and then the drums come in and the lyrics come in, obviously. But it was really, I think, obvious with this last record, this newest record, that we've had growth having another person to write with us.
I think this album too, I just want to say that on the originating with the riff, like our title track on this new album, we really felt strongly that it needed to, in more of a drone direction, like be more stripped down. And it was just guitar and synth. And we had contributions from Ethan McCarthy creating noise on top of it. And I really feel like that in and of itself was an articulation of something deep that we felt needed to be in the album, and didn't need necessarily drums or bass or vocals, and just really like, take a second to just really like digest that riff and like the darkness by itself.
So we'll talk about the new album and Eric's contributions to the band in a little bit. Back to your songwriting just for 1 second.
Sure.
At what point do riffs translate into songs? And at what point do the two of you go into the rehearsal room with a song? Like, how complete is a song when you guys start jamming on it or start rehearsing it?
Well, the riff becomes a song when there's a pair. For me, a song can never really be one riff. And I feel like the birth of what we begin to call a song, at least in Oryx, is a relationship between two riffs that creates, that creates that dynamic journey. I feel like by itself, it's a meditation. A single riff is a meditation. And then beyond that, it grows into something more complex. And the relationship between the two riffs is really what creates the ebbs and flows and the dynamics in the song. And so I think that really once we get a feel for how two riffs can really communicate with each other in a song and not just necessarily be a verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus type thing, but have a very like constructive growth and dynamic element, then that's I think the point where we know we have a song. Beyond that, we always look for ways to create nuance and ways to create darkness and depth and ambience that don't rely exclusively on the riff. And that's where a lot of the construction comes in collaboratively.
Yeah, we'll have riffs going, and then like Tommy's saying, you start building a song by adding where the riffs are going to go and how does that all like kind of flow and transition together. And then we'll definitely add, the last, or I guess one of the next steps is like thinking about what layers you want to add to it. And we can definitely get into that with the later questions with the new album. But I think that was just really present with the writing in this album was adding synth and which Tommy was playing some synth on this, and, adding solos and adding just guitar parts that we just hadn't really accentuated in other records. So it was great to see even just like what we can do with our songwriting and involving that. So
Abbey, you spoke a lot about growing as a musician, growing as a drummer. There seemed to be a lot of growth between your first album, Widowmaker, and the next one, Stolen Absolution. How would you characterize the change between those two albums?
Yeah, with Widowmaker was really kind of our first dive into recording in general. We had experience doing home recordings and things like that. I just really would say that's just the beginning of our journey. We worked really hard on that album. I will always be really grateful for that album because it's the beginning of the story, I guess, for this band. But at the same time, I think being younger musicians and just being kind of at the start of this, we didn't have a full vision exactly what we wanted to do long term with it, and even just where we wanted to go with it. It was kind of like we wrote these songs, let's record them right away, let's get this out there. And I think as time went on with Oryx and our later albums, we spent more time developing the songs, and with that, improving our musicianship individually. Me playing drums, Tommy with his guitar and his vocal style and things like that evolved. And I just think Widowmaker is, a taste of kind of, you hear the influences that we were really, liking at that time. And in the beginning, I mean, Tommy's vocal styles are very different in that album. And I think just the big difference is confidence and growth. I think especially with me and drumming, just improving my drumming over time. I think that comes just like I said, when we first started practicing or playing together, I was learning as I went at that time. So a lot of it was learning as I experienced shows, as we played, as we recorded, that first time. For me, that was my first time recording in a studio. So a lot of things were learned on the spot. And then Stolen Absolution, It was a really good experience too, as just kind of the first time recording with, I guess a more serious studio with Dave Otero. It was our first experience doing that, really being like, we're going to go in, we're going to really push ourselves with this album. And I'm really proud of Stolen Absolution. I think that's a good album for us, but it really was, I think, just in the process and songwriting and developing, a lot of that was rushed, because when you're active as a band, sometimes you're on that schedule of, okay, we need to put this album out this time, we need a tour right after, we have only these days to record and things like that. And that changed with Lamenting a Dead World, as far as giving ourselves more time to develop songs, with the pandemic kind of affecting that without our choice. But at the same time, we did go into it, even with this last album, knowing we wanted to develop these song ideas further than we've ever done before. So we did have bigger goals, I think, with this last album.
Tommy, do you want to add anything to that, or talk about how your riffing style may have changed?
I think one of the major things that we learned between Widowmaker and Stolen Absolution, and then I think is certainly, the learning process kept deepening with Lamenting a Dead World. But one of the greatest things I think that we learned through the years was just patience. Primarily just patience with the riff, patience with songwriting, letting riffs develop, letting articulation develop, where we really, rather than feeling compelled to write an album, like you write an album because it's something within you that has to be expressed, and that organic yearning has to articulate itself, whether you like it or not, is essentially it's a neurosis and catharsis relationship. And so we have learned how to deal with that, I think, in a better way, where I think we've begun to sit with ourselves and the darkness expressed in a more patient and less kind of knee-jerk way. And that's I think that's a primary difference between albums in my perspective. For being a slow band, like we've had a hard time really wanting riffs to go beyond 4 times or something, like we want there to be like momentum, like we want it to feel like it's moving. And, in that way, I think we're like the worst at like writing slow music. Like we've learned that over time to sit with ourselves and just chill the fuck out a little bit more about that. But in an odd way, as much as this music comes naturally, I don't think that process is natural in a lot of respects. So we've grown in that way in an odd sense, Yeah, with Widowmaker, I think every 4 times we felt compelled to change the riff, and keep it moving. But yeah.
So let's talk about Lamenting a Dead World. It's your latest album, and it came out at the end of April through Translation Lost Records. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the goals that you had going into this album. Can you tell me what those goals were?
We had ideas of really wanting to, with a third person involved in the group at the start of writing this album, we wanted to really be able to utilize that, to our advantage. When we were kind of coming up with the ideas behind every riff and every song, we thought, this is a point that we can push doing more soloing and doing, just more focus on each instrument. And I think just having those goals going into it, and we wanted to get an album into a larger audience too. We have self-released a lot of our previous records and worked with friends that own, DIY run labels. So we kind of were thinking, we really do want to have an album that is able to reach, something internationally. And going into it, like, it's been a while since we've been able to do vinyl too. So we really were thinking, we wanted to go into something and have the full package, but also have the music that matches that product, have something that's really just going to leave a mark or leave an impact. And I think we were starting to practice and play some of these songs live in 2019 during some bigger shows that we had. And we kind of thought, all right, this is working. This direction is working. And let's take that back to the writing room and push it even further. So I think just we had the goals of thinking bigger with this record. And then that led to, we want to do collaborations. We want to add different instruments in this. We want to record this as big as we can and make it sound huge, because that's kind of what we were able to hone in on our live shows for the past few years. So how do we bring that to a record? And I think coming in with those ideas into the recording studio really helped us push further than we've ever done before.
Yeah, I think the choice to unite forces with Translation Lost was a great decision. I mean, just creatively, I think that they basically, they left the creative aspect in our court, which is what we want. We were always very apprehensive about losing creative control with labels, and we only worked with labels that respected our vision and basically let us put out what we want to put out. And Translation Lost, I think, was that plus, an enhancement in their own way. Like, they put so much care into the final product of, they're obsessed with splattered vinyl, and we are too. And, I think it was like, let's do this, yeah, it was I don't know. I think it was an opportunity to kind of take something we envisioned and actually potentially see it, to see this thing actually happen, in a elevated way, which was something that, we basically have always put all of our money into recording and everything. And then there's not a lot left to put out, put thousands of dollars into splattered vinyl or whatever else, and it's that help, I think, has been, again, it's something we were shy about. We never wanted to have a monetary investment in that way that influenced the end result. But I think in this particular circumstance, I think it worked out really well. And it's been like a pretty great relationship so far. So we're very happy.
So is this your first album as a 3-piece?
It is. Yeah, we recorded our Born Into Madness EP with bass, but that was just Abbey and I on the recording. And at that point we were already playing with Eric, but at that point he was kind of involved in primarily the live show aspect. And then, this album is the first actually recording with him. So that's very exciting.
Tell me how you met Eric, how he came on board full time, and what he brings to your sound.
We've known him for, since we were still living in Las Cruces. We were driving up to Colorado Springs and Denver all the time to play shows. And we ended up actually doing the Widowmaker record release in Colorado Springs, oddly enough, even though we were still living in Las Cruces. And Eric was playing in a ton of bands that we'd become, really good friends with, and we were playing shows together all the time and shotgunning beers as often as possible, and a friendship grew out of that.
Yeah, we've known him for many years, and we had played with other bassists, but we knew that his guitar skills, because he's normally playing guitar in his other bands. He shreds. He's a shreddy dude. And we knew he could be super reliable, super solid as just a member of the band. And coming into a two-piece is one thing, but coming into a two-piece as a married couple is a whole other thing. And it takes the right person to fit in that jigsaw puzzle. Deal with our bullshit. Yeah. So, we knew that most likely the third person is going to be a friend, a really good friend, a person that can put up with us and our shenanigans, but also super talented. And he also has always just been a great support to Oryx, has been on the road with us previously selling merch and helping us with that and helping us load. And so we knew it could work. We knew it could work together. And then, I think he has changed our sound with just having, like I said earlier, just that collaborative process as far as being and having another guitarist, bassist in the band that's thinking like Tommy is. Tommy and I sometimes we communicate as best we can with writing. But I don't play guitar, so I don't always know how to communicate those things of what I think should be changed or, what I think could be added. And having Eric involved, we'd sit down and he could just sit with Tommy and riff together. And also he has very similar taste in music that we do. So he was really great with, vocal ideas and kind of themes behind every song. And as far as adding synth and those kind of layers too, because we all share very similar tastes. So I think ultimately, and I'll say this in every interview, that it's just been great to have a third voice work with us and add a voice that hasn't been there before. And, it's great that, and we're happy with the records we put out as a two-piece and what we've been able to say with those records. But I think having this, third person has been like the tiebreaker for certain things, has been the person that comes up with a new idea, and it just brings a refreshing take to a message into a band that has been around for a while.
So with the writing process that you two described to me earlier, how does Eric fit into that?
At this point, actually, we write a lot together. Since he does live about an hour away, we send back and forth, recorded riffs and kind of build on that. And during Lamenting a Dead World writing, we were slated to record in March of 2020 with Greg Wilkinson in Oakland. And, they were going into quarantine at that time. And so we ended up basically delaying our recording about 4 months. And during that time, Eric, basically like Eric and I and Abbey, we all were able to really sit with the songs and kind of, edit a lot, and also really work on like layering and what like sonically what we wanted to achieve, which I think was extra time that was hugely beneficial and we had never really given ourselves before.
Yeah, he would come up every weekend, make the drive, and really committed to being able to write what we needed to write in the time we had set before recording. And recording locally in Denver actually did make things easier on a lot of levels, but it extended the writing process even further and the practice time that we had. And, he, like Tommy's saying, we were able to send riffs to Eric. He could kind of give some feedback back on that and send it back to us, but then also come up and just play it every week. And so we were grinding for several months preparing for the recording of this album, like all bands do. But, it definitely was an added challenge to have an out-of-town basis. But if you live in the area, Colorado Springs and Denver, sometimes it's just interchangeable cities. Like it's easy to get to and from, for the most part. But we've really enjoyed writing with him. And yeah.
What would you say the role of the bass is in your music?
At this point, it's been evolving. I mean, originally we recorded Born into Madness with bass essentially like laying down the root, or writing the root really, which I don't think we ever really wanted. We wanted bass to be like an expressive third member and not necessarily just be like a deeper guitar, So as we've worked more with Eric and really like, we've kind of like navigated where these songs want to go, I think Last Breath is a really good example of just like starting a song with bass and, allowing that to be the initial, expressive value. That's just a super reverberated, clean bass is actually like very dark and very like ominous. And he really was able to capture that. I think that there's just like a dark essence to it. And I think it was, as a third member, he's really began to like articulate his own voice. And we're seeing where it goes. He's an active member of the band. So we're, we love his contributions and everything. I mean, it's an evolving project,
When did you actually start working on the album?
We had started writing in 2019, since we were initially, maybe even a little bit before that, but I mean, a lot of it was 2019 and 2020 because we were scheduled to record in early 2020. So we were definitely like on that time crunch in 2019 that, hey, we want to come back from one of our tours in November and really finish writing and editing and things like that. And then, so we were pretty set on what we were going to record by the time we were supposed to in March of 2020. But since that all got pushed back and canceled and, we had our plans changed like everyone else did, we were able to kind of tweak things more just because whenever you have time to sit with your music and to edit, I think any musician will. So it just kind of forced us into the situation where, we were able to go back to songs and really expand on what we thought should or edit things. And, it was just added time to that. So, yeah.
Which song would you say changed the most because of the extra time that you spent on it?
Definitely Oblivion.
Yeah, Oblivion, with just the length of that song, there was just aspects that were written kind of in blocks and then melding them together and doing the transitions and things like that. So Oblivion was definitely a song that we were able to tweak and work with and deciding what the layers we wanted to sound like or what, working with Paul on the synth and what that was going to look like. And, adding just different things where Tommy's doing his like acoustic or, the middle part of that song. And just those parts were each kind of broken down into blocks and how we wanted those to transition together. I think that was what took a long time, is how do you meld all of these riffs?
Yeah, we ended up, I think every time, I don't know, I was in a point where creatively I would keep, basically just riff writing and realizing that what I really wanted to do was expand that song and keep expanding on, riffs that essentially kept evolving into riffs that would actually all work together. And like I was saying before, adding two riffs together and realizing that there's something there, like it's kind of a really bizarre feeling when you realize you have like 6 or 7 riffs that actually all work together as well. And that's like, it's a very bizarre kind of quest to like make that make sense. And so I really actually in a way, I really appreciate the extra time that we ended up forcing ourselves to have, because it was like, how do you like edit this mammoth 15-minute song like in a way that isn't fucking boring, like for me to play, just like for me to, I don't want to hate this a year from now, like that tends to be, honestly, I feel like, we tend to hate our old albums because our whole perspective is moving forward all the time. And like, we basically write an album and then tend to want to just like, okay, cool, whatever, what's next? And I think with Lamenting a Dead World, it's like, no, let's write something that I won't, I want to write something I won't fucking wish was elaborated on or said in a different way or whatever. And so far I don't hate it. Well, I'll get there though.
Well, what's the solution to that problem? How do you write a 15-minute song that you don't end up hating?
I mean, hopefully we did it. But the solution is definitely
but for you personally.
Well, it's just time. It's time. It's that patience of just like waiting for a riff to like knock around, in your head long enough to really figure it out and really understand, like, this is how it should be. Like, this is the appropriate way to present this riff, and this is the most impactful way, or whatever, and or even within, like Abby was mentioning, in like ambient parts or acoustic parts or clean. I mean, it still needs to be done in a way that is not like it needs to build properly. It needs to have like a cadence that has a natural kind of flow and beyond, do we do this 2 times, 4 times, whatever? What is the feeling? What is the essence of this riff that really is like, it takes on like just like a flow. It's like a flow state, and there's like, at a certain point, I think the riff is right and the song is right when you stop thinking about that, about the amount of times or the quantitization of everything, and it's just about the feeling of it. And that I think, that begins to express itself in all kinds of random starts and stops and all the nuances that begin to originate from that, I think, are what make songs, more like digestible, I guess, or they seem to just flow.
Condemn
So you mentioned wanting to record this with Greg Wilkinson at Earhammer and not being able to because of the COVID travel restrictions. Where did you end up recording it?
Yeah, we recorded at Juggernaut Studios with Ben Romsdale. Yeah, and we actually had heard about him from other friends in the Denver scene that he had recorded with recently. And so, there definitely was recommendations that he was the guy to kind of go to for heavier music here. So we're really excited to have a new experience too. But we did want to have Greg Wilkinson's hand on this project, absolutely. So he was able to mix and master the final recording. So we were able to still have him be a part of it and have his influence and work with it. So yeah, we definitely want to return to Greg too at some point, just because recording with him and our Born into Madness EP was really a great experience. And his history and his kind of history of bands that he's done and his own bands, like you can tell when you've recorded with him that it's just a great experience, So we do want to go back to him in the future, but we ended up recording here and it was a great experience too.
Greg's name comes up a lot on this podcast, especially with bands from the Bay Area where he's based. He's also, he's like the go-to for metal bands in that area. I think somebody referred to him as the Scott Burns of the Bay Area, of the Bay Area death metal scene.
Yeah, we were just listening to the Vastum one.
Yeah, we heard his name come up. Yeah.
What would you say he brings to your sound?
Man, that's a lot of things. With this last one, I think he definitely works some magic that I mean, because it was mixing and mastering and it was all done remote. I mean, I would have loved to have gotten the opportunity to sit there and pick his brain about it. As annoying, I'm sure that would have been for him. But having recorded with him, I mean, he has an ear for, well, I guess simply put, I mean, recording loud music and recording heavy music it's such a bizarre thing. And I think even through our experience recording with Oryx, with multiple engineers, the way to achieve a heavy record isn't necessarily how you would perform it live. And so there's just so many weird tricks and things and getting used to recording with smaller amps that produce, deeper sounds and things. I mean, there's a lot of bizarre conundrums, within the recording experience that don't really necessarily I mean, you could probably get a really great tone from a pig nose if you have the right mics and everything. So, I mean, having a two full stacks in a recording doesn't make any sense. So it's so he has just developed that ear for what it takes to sonically reach a very expansive place. And I think his hand mixing and mastering, I mean, I definitely think that Ben Romsdal definitely, he recorded a lot of with room mics and things that we also used a full 12-foot plate reverb. It's the size of a whole room. And there were many things that we got to use in this last process that were I think pretty one of a kind experience in that way. But yeah, Greg he does have an ear though for where to put things in the mix that they just sound big. He does it right.
So one word I've seen in relation to this album is depth. Would you say that's part of what Greg Wilkinson brings to your sound?
Yeah, I think we saw that too coming up in a lot of reviews, and we heard that as well, even just with the raw recordings with Ben, and then adding more of that after Greg was able to work on it. And I think Tommy was mentioning, with the way that the room mics were set up and the different ways that Ben was able to capture sound, the depth was in that too, in the tone of the drums, and the vocals and things like that. I think there was just all of these layers that Ben was able to really capture well. And then Greg's experience with those sounds and with those tones to be able to hone in on that and really make sure that everything is heard separately and individually while doing really well putting them all together.
Yeah, talking to Greg on the phone, various times about the mixing and mastering process while he was in the middle of it was one word that he used a lot was dynamics. And I think that was definitely where his focus was. And I really certainly appreciate that from him. But I think that, having it's such a tricky balance. I think sometimes having reverberated, big room feel, but then having punch at the same time and depth and clarity and all that. I mean, it's a pretty insane thing to try and mix down. I'm definitely not, I don't have that ear for that. He has a particular talent.
So let's talk about some of the collaborators that you had on this album. You mentioned one, Ethan McCarthy. Do you want to talk about who you brought on board for this album and what their contributions were?
Yeah, we brought in Ethan McCarthy from Primitive Man, Vermin Womb, and Many Blessings to do like oral noise fixtures in Lamenting a Dead World, the track. And that focus was very much like a drone piece that I think, we've seen Many Blessings perform many times and really felt like inspired by him and felt like it would be a strong collaboration. And so we worked with him on that. And then we had Eric Osterhout of Skullex and Chthonic Deity do guest vocals on Misery. And she everything she does is awesome. She knocked it out of the park. It was awesome. Like, I think first take,
yeah.
Like, I mean, it's ridiculous. Too much talent. But yeah, and then we had Paul Riedel on Oblivion, and he was performing synth, and that was great. He brought in his whole synth setup, multiple synths, many space echoes, and just space tones, space sounds. It was awesome. It was, I think, in a crazy way too. We kind of just were like, just do whatever you think sounds right. And he and I had worked, together for a while before that, but then he basically came in and did like a first take, and that was like, it was a keeper. That's what we ended up keeping on it. So it was a pretty incredible experience collaborating with these guys.
So Lamenting a Dead World is out now through Translation Lost Records. Abbey and Tommy, what is the best way for people to order this album?
You can go on to translationlost.com. I believe they still have some albums left.
Very few copies if you want to grab the first press.
Yeah, apparently they're...
And we have some also around the Denver area and record stores too, if you want to check that out.
Yeah, we have Painter Action Records, Wax Tracks, Mutiny Cafe, Puss and Shout, and definitely trying to get the records out to our Denver homies. So
you mentioned Translation Lost's fixation with splattered vinyl.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about the splattered vinyl that they've created for this album?
Yeah, we ended up going with two variants. One is black, brown, and gold, metallic gold, and then the other is like a red, blue, and cream tricolor merge. And I mean, I think they both came out fantastic. It's just each one is different. It's like we're always used to black vinyl, so we're like, damn, this is crazy.
And if people want to follow you guys online and keep up to date with what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Our Instagram is, I think, the most active out of all of the social medias. That's the band Oryx is our Instagram handle. And then we also are on Facebook, and you can also follow us on Spotify. And our Bandcamp, oryx.bandcamp.com, has basically all of our merch, and you can also listen to the album there.
And all your previous albums are on the Bandcamp page as well, right?
Correct, yes.
Very cool. Is there anything else you guys want to say?
No, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate you having us, man.
Really appreciate this interview, and you have a really great backlog of interviews that we were checking out too, and we appreciate being a part of it.
Yeah, we've been listening. It's good stuff, man.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it.